everybody vertigo. All right, so a few things here. What are we looking at? So you probably saw, if you've been keeping up at all, that I posted this little thing earlier. A little bit nicer close-up. You can get a better idea what it actually looks like. So what this is the head of the mecha that I've been building, the racing mecha. And this was the original configuration. Actually, the original configuration was this thing had it was a big shell all the way across, but I didn't like how wide it had gotten. It was a little bit too big. It was like a big ball. So what I ended up doing is cutting slices down in here. So the sides got chopped off, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I had this ball that I built, which was just literally like this. This is what the original shape was, just a ball. And it was hollow. Well, not hollow, but what I had done, again, if you've been watching any of the other videos, this was originally filled with foam clay. So what I did is I made a little ball of foam clay. I coated it in epoxy sculpt, epoxy resin, and let it harden, and scooped out the gooey innards. So all this got scooped out, and that's pretty much how this was made. This was originally, actually the way I made this thing was I had this ball. I covered this with foam clay in the teardrop shape of the helmet I was doing. And then I layered that on top with more epoxy. And what I ended up with was kind of like a skin over this, which was the perfect shape for the bottom one to fit in. Kind of like a reverse mold. And then popped it off and then filled it back up with more epoxy. And I think there's no, all the soft stuff's gone. It's all solid. Probably there's a little bit of foam clay embedded inside this thicker area here, but it's all a hard, thick shell now. And actually, when I was taking it apart, this actually broke into 3 pieces. So it got separated. There was a big crack here and a big crack along this side or across the top. It was just broken in 3 pieces. I just crazy glued it together and sanded it, and then just added some more epoxy across the sides. This wasn't originally that bulbous. It was just straight down. So I added this lip and this little kind of a bulbous area here to kind of fit more in line with what I was originally designing. And I decided to add this kind of a little skirt or lip here to sort of match, what was going on in the back here. But now I'm looking at it, and I don't really like that. I've had to change up my design a couple of times now. And after hollowing this out, originally I was going to store some wiring, maybe some batteries in there. But I decided I'm going to go a different route. The torso wasn't big enough for me to realistically fit a cockpit in it. And I could probably still do it, to be honest, but it just, the way it looked, it just seemed a lot easier for me to, and as big as his helmet had gotten, there was just a lot of unused space. So let me kind of sketch out something here. We'll see if we can give you a little bit of a better idea. So the shape of this thing, again, was originally more of a teardrop. So what you're looking at was something like this. It was literally just a teardrop shape. And it was a really wide teardrop. And I just didn't like that. It looks a lot straighter when I draw it. There we go. Let's do this. So it looked like that. And what I ended up doing was cutting the sides off of it like this to end up with this shape, right? And in the end, I really like that better. it exposed this thing to the side. That's why I added that kind of like little tapered area. Kind of looks like a German Sallet or Salet helmet if you're in a medieval armor. But yeah, the idea was to kind of get that kind of curved racing helmet of some skiers or bicyclists, things like that. Hey, Quijin, what's going on? So I'm just explaining my process here and some of the changes I've made to my robot. So after looking at it earlier, after I shot that little quickie video and seeing how squirrely it is, I thought, oh, well, that's cool. You know, maybe when I put magnets on it, because that's how this is going to be attached, is with magnets. The idea was, well, you know what I could do is, yeah, yeah, I haven't come on live on YouTube for a while now, but I figured what I could do is, you know, oh, maybe I could make this thing where like this helmet is like part of the airfoil. That was the original intention, but now it's got this sort of movement thing, and you know, you can use it as an air brake if it moves forward. And you know, after that, I was like, no, it's just too complicated, and it's really not worth the effort. And what I noticed is when I put it the opposite direction, it's very stable. In other words, when I put this lip facing towards this, it kind of locks it in place a little bit better. And what I end up with is this sort of nice shape. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to put it so the lip. Oh yeah, that's all right. I'm going to put it so the lip of this is in line with the forward lip of the top part. And that kind of locks it in place. I'm going to sculpt out a little bit more behind here, and I'm going to put some details in the shape of this helmet, like maybe some coils. Might put some vents, some little cameras, maybe on this thing. And this is, man, I don't understand. You don't understand how much sanding this thing has been through to get it to where it is now. I mean, just a ton. It's like buttery smooth. But yeah, there's still a lot more to go. Hey, Lord Ryder. Welcome. So what I'm describing here is what am I using, Milliput? No, I'm not. I'm using epoxy sculpt. There was a point where, and you can see a little remnants of green in some places, but there was a point where I did use a mix of Milliput with green stuff on some sections. But I just decided to get away from that. I didn't need anything to be flexible right now. I needed it to be really rigid. Sorry about the constant in and out focus. I've got this thing literally in my lap to try to get this sorted out for you. So yeah, what I'm going to do is put this lip forward, lock it in place. So you're going to have the shape that's going to look just like that. This will still be removable. So I'm going to mount magnets in here and a magnet in here so that this snaps into place the way it's supposed to. I'm going to sculpt out a little bit more to fill that gap, but for the most part, that's going to be like vents on the side, maybe a camera or something up in the front or two. And then what's going to happen is this. Let me sketch that out for you. What's going to happen, I'm going to hold the camera while I do this, hopefully not kick us off line, is, so let's say this is our helmet, right? I'll get it kind of as close as I can. Something like this. So this is our kind of our curve in our helmet, and then here's the other one that goes underneath it, right? This is basically what we've got. This sort of, we'll call it like a dolphin nose shape, right? Yeah, I don't know what that was. Probably my wife hitting something in the closet. I don't know. So yeah, what we've got is this. And you've got the base part of it. So this is going to be now the cockpit because, frankly, there's a lot of room in there. I mean, it's just completely empty. What I'm going to do is this is about once the original idea was this is going to be about a 1/72nd scale. So now that I've got all this room in here, I'm not going to put any electronics in it or leave it hollow. What I'm going to sculpt is I'm going to make a little disc that fits exactly right in here, and I'm going to build the cockpit to fit directly in there. And I'll put a little magnet in here so that it latches in place. And then I'm going to put the pilot like this with some controls attached to it. Right? And then this is going to have a little divot underneath it. A sort of a little ball joint divot. And then that part is going to be attached to that torso. So what you've got is this goes into here. Oops, broke my lead. That goes into there. And then this part goes into the helmet. And what you end up with is something that looks like this. Slightly off scale, but effectively this is going to have a little guy that sort of inserts inside this. And then the base of that cockpit becomes where the helmet, or rather the head, pivots on the body. So what ends up happening is I'll be able to take this piece off and you'll have this piece sitting on top, right? And then underneath this will be the cockpit section, which will then have a little base that rests on top of that. And actually, we're going to reverse this. So this little lip is actually going to face the same direction as the one on the helmet. Because if you'll note, when I put it on that, it doesn't rotate around as much as when I have it the other direction, which it does quite a bit. So this sort of locks it in place very nicely. And I think it sort of seats it, you know. The other thing that's kind of cool, which doesn't really, I know it sounds like a lot of effort, but it doesn't really take that much effort, is if I really want to, since there's so much hollow space in here and it kind of curves around, what I'm thinking is where this helmet is, let's get over here where there's a little more space. So I've got this helmet and it's kind of bulbous on the inside. We're just looking at the interior, right? Since this little cockpit's going to fit in there, right? You know, to go inside here, it wouldn't be too hard for me to actually sculpt some little screens to go inside it. Or alternatively, I mean, to make them, I don't know, it'd make more sense from the standpoint of like high tech. I just smooth out the interior and then paint it all sky blue, like the entire inside of this dome is one giant 360-degree multi-screen. So what you'll actually end up with is something that's like this on the side. And I mean, it would be as easy as just painting this all to look like a big giant screen and maybe just put some panel lines in there so that it looks cool. So that way, when this actually raises up off of the cockpit section and you're left with this little guy, inside it, there's some more detail to look at. You know, oh, hey, that's cool. What's that? Instead of just looking at a bunch of gray scratches. But yeah, that's kind of one advantage of having it be hollow. And this is pretty strong stuff. I mean, it's very, very solid. I ran into one problem with the legs, which are in the garage. I don't want to go get them. Where, because remember, this is how I made these things. So all of these, including this, basically started with a chunk of foam clay. And you've probably, if you look at some of my other videos, I've got some examples of me making stuff with foam clay. But basically, I just kind of made a general shape. Like here's a leg, for instance. I made a general shape out of foam clay, and then I layered it. I layered it with epoxy sculpt. So it's got a sort of a thick layer of resin around it. The problem is, specifically on the upper legs, the problem I ran into is, I wasn't very careful when I was making because it is kind of hard to get the foam clay to react the way you want it to. So I might have one that was a little more bulbous, that kind of came out this way, and one that was a little more narrow. And in an effort to sand this one down to get it to the same shape as this, because most things are symmetrical when you're talking about robots for the most part. But in an effort to sand this down to get it lighter, or rather closer to this shape, I wore down so much of the outside thick hardened layer that it became eggshell thin, and I actually cracked through sections of it. And I ended up having to go back and repair it and resand it and everything else. Thanks. I'm like north of the border. Well, I don't know about all that. He works with clay a lot more than I do for sure. And I watch him. I think he's super talented. Adam is a super quirky, entertaining guy to watch. I'm probably not quite that entertaining. And I definitely don't plan as much. I don't plan my videos. I definitely plan my builds, but I don't plan my videos so much. But yeah, I work with clay too, but not like he does. And I think he's got his own kind of style. I kind of approach things from thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, the way I approach things is somewhere, I guess the best way to describe it would be somewhere between mad scientist. I do a lot of engineering planning in my head, and it doesn't always turn out the way I want it to when it gets fleshed out in reality. So, yeah, all this stuff started as foam clay, and then had this hard candy-like shell. I mean, even this thin one is extremely hard. Tip tap. But yeah. But the good news is, I managed to repair all that. I managed to get all the legs and everything else worked out. And I'm going to be sculpting well, not so much sculpting as model building, scratch building the little cockpit section. I did come up with some paint schemes for what the finished model is going to look like once I'm done. And I've been trying to source out, I'll just tell you right now. Yeah, the only thing I don't really plan, and if you've looked at my other videos, like the junk bots, I don't plan those at all. I literally just get a pile of stuff and throw it on my desk, and I turn on the camera and just start building stuff. So that's not planned, that's planned 0%. So every junk bot you've seen me build, I built it pretty much on the fly. Right out of the gate. I just threw a bunch of stuff on the desk and slapped it together probably most of them took about 45 minutes to an hour. There were a couple that I ran into some issues with. Of particular note, I think there was one that was like car fumes and spray paint cans were getting me like super high. But yeah, always use ventilation, kids. Always ventilate. But yeah, I think the temperature and the heat in the garage at one point was like around 120 at that point. And that's why for a while I moved back to this desk I got, which I used for little projects, and it turned into like a gigantic catastrophe. Right now I was doing some electrical stuff. But yeah, that's yeah, you don't want to work in severe extremes of heat or breathing in any junk. So, and even right now, I mean, even just sanding these pieces with the Dremel, I use a lot of, I use a very heavy duty 3M mask, which apparently I had too tight because it left a red mark on the bridge of my nose. So I wasn't real happy about that. But yeah, I just wanted to give an update, kind of give everybody an idea what I was doing with this thing for those interested. Um, it's still going to be 11 inches tall. It's still going to be posable. The posability is, I just love biting off more than I can chew and then trying to make the best of any mistakes I make along the way. But man, that's I really shouldn't have waited till the last minute to start working on this thing because I've only got, what's today, the 4th, the 3rd. So I have 27 days, barely 3 weeks to finish this robot. And I'm not even done building it. In other words, I'm not even done with the basic parts to assemble it. So if anything, even whether I finish this or not, you'll see how fast I can build stuff. If I had nothing but time to work on it, that would be awesome. I don't think I'd have an issue. My big problem is I work a lot of hours at work in my day job. So this is kind of like what I do in my very, very narrow amounts of spare time. So just to, again, recoup or repeat what I was doing. You can't tell anymore. Well, yeah, you can definitely tell I'm doing mine. I'll tell you that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little scratch-built cockpit. And what I'll probably do is make the majority of it out of plastic card. Real simple. You just cut a little piece of plastic card out. I might even use a bottle cap or a dime or I don't know, whatever fits. Then I'm going to use some pieces to, make that little chair, and then we're going to put that together. And then I'm going to get some green stuff. I will be using green stuff for this. And I'm going to sculpt a little pilot that goes in there. And originally the idea was this was going to be, I had a whole backstory for this. Like, oh, this is little female pilot. And her dad had a shop, like a hot rod shop. And she got really good at driving the bots and stuff. And when I say hot rods, like hot rodded robots. So then I'm going to sculpt the pilot into the chair. And hopefully it'll fit into this skull and still be about one. I think this is, I'm going to say this is probably just under an inch tall. So 1/72nd scale is about an inch tall. So a seated 1/72nd scale figure should fit in here just fine, I think. Oh yeah, it's very difficult to make. If this were a model kit and I was just kit bashing, I probably could knock this out in a day easily. When you're having to hand make every single part and measure every single curve, it gets real tricky. So yeah, there isn't any part of this robot that I didn't, except for like maybe the wooden beads I'm using for the ball joints, that isn't made by hand. So yeah, it gets very difficult. But it's not without its highlights. The reward is that you really, the advantage is you really know what you're building and you can build it exactly how you want it to look without anybody else's design or input. So one of the other things too that I had to make a change on was the way the legs were. So originally I had a ball and the thighs were like this. And that's the way they looked. And then there was a slot because I was going to go with like what's called a BJD or ball joint doll. That's BJD, folks. BJD, ball joint doll. So this was going to have some elastic that went through it and connected the knees and then the lower leg. Well, the problem was that the way that the upper hips were designed, or lower hips, I should say, there was going to be a ball here, and then the torso is going to be mounted up on this, right? Okay, so no problem with the torso. That's good. The centerpiece, good. This part's good. However, with this epoxy all the way about halfway to here, I couldn't wedge it into the socket in here comfortably. In other words, there wasn't enough play or movement inside that ball joint. So what ended up happening is I had to go and sand down and shave all of this epoxy out of the way down to where I had a ball sticking out like that. And what that allowed me to do is get this into the socket and have that movement that I wanted, that freedom of movement. So now it looks like this. You've got this ball that's sticking out with a little bit of an edge here, and it fits into the socket a little bit better. What's going to end up happening with this is when this is done, and if you look at the other pictures I've put up online, everything on the figure right now looks like smooth and shiny, like a dolphin. Everything is polished and sanded down and then spray painted with primer, and everything pretty much looks like this. Real smooth. And it maybe doesn't even, I can't even convey how smooth this actually is. You can see there are imperfections in the paint, but the actual feel of this is super, super smooth, like very, very smooth. Same thing with this. I probably have to go through and sand it down even smoother, but once that's done, it's not going to stay smooth. It's actually going to have another layer on top of that. And so instead of these smooth forms you're seeing, I'm actually going to start adding panel lines, like any other mecha or robot. And I'm going to start adding some vents and little rivet details, and maybe even some carbon fiber here and there. And then when this thing gets painted up, it's not going to be just a solid black or solid red. I had originally considered going like with a Ferrari race car look. But what I really like the look of is modern JDM cars. And if you guys like drift cars or like old school or even some of the newer Japanese drift cars or American cars, what have you. What I really like about the style of those vehicles is they're very cool and flashy. And one of the ideas I had, I'm going to need some more paper here. I'm actually holding my camera the whole time. You can see the shadow of it right here, but one of the ideas I had is, like, if you look at a modern JDM vehicle, let's just do a quick sketch of something like that, right? We'll do like some kind of like little boxy Celica or something like that. When you look at one of those vehicles, what you got is, they're very cool looking. They've got that sort of cool little C-pillar, and the vents in the front, and like the whole front end of it's just kind of like all opened up. And they might have something like this, where they've got that sort of, I wanted to give this thing like a really cool race car look, right? They've got the wheels that are like all, the camber's all squashed out. So they're all like, they're all slammed. I'm just doing this real fast to give you kind of an idea. So one of the things I liked about some of those, this is like old school. Let me get rid of that. They're more angular. There we go. So let's say you've got a car like that. More lead. And you got your spoiler in the back or whatever. I like how they put the big panels, like the wheel wells. They add the wheel wells on it. And I like how they have the paint jobs are like these real splashy, off center, cool things with all the little stickers on them and stuff, like the Japanese rising sun flag on it or something. I want to do something like that with a paint job on this robot. So instead of your typical boring, militaristic, or, in the case of like a lot of the Gundams, they're just that red, yellow, blue primary colors because little kids love primary colors. If you don't know much about Gundam, that's why they picked those colors, by the way. That was a corporate decision to make those red, yellow, and blue with white. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So instead of having this like, kind of cool robot with like just a bunch of, very basic colors, I wanted to have something that had like a really cool, like a street racer kind of color scheme, with like some cool patterns and like like a Momo steering or whatever label over here, and like the little pig, or I'm not saying I'm going to put angry Kelvin and Hobbes everywhere, but the point is it's going to have some kind of cool paint job on it. So anyway, that's my update. Hopefully I didn't lose you, or I made at least a little bit of sense. But yeah, that's where I'm at. This is the helmet. This is the cockpit. Trust me. Trust the process. Trust the process. Anyway, sorry about the bad lighting and everything else, but yeah, hopefully you got a little bit of something out of this. And I know it's kind of weird. I don't have a lot of the fast, quick project posts that I had in the beginning, because this is kind of a really big, very labor intensive one. And like I said, I don't have a ton of free time. So a lot of my little projects have kind of fallen to the wayside. So I don't know, there haven't been any bots or any little miniature type things made, but I promise the deadline for this is October 31st. I have to finish it before then. So I don't know, I guess part of the excitement will be able to see if I can actually do it in time. And maybe if I even do get it done in time, will I even place? Will I even, win first or second or third or fifth or whatever? Or will I just get an honorable mention for most laboriously constructed? Who knows? But hey, guys, those of you that stopped in and said hello, I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping into the live chat. Lord Ryder, thanks. Quejan, thanks. Appreciate it. Anybody else who dropped in, much appreciated. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Catch you later. We'll see. Bye.